So how much do cities really get back when attracting these large companies? Well, to find out, I'm joined by Paul Roberts, an author and a journalist who writes about technology, business, and politics. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachelle.
So let's start with the positives that could come with housing Amazon's second headquarters. What can this potentially mean for a city and its economy?
Well, I mean, look at the basic numbers. You're looking at a $5 billion campus and then 50,000 workers making an average of 100 grand a year. So just that immediate economic stimulus is huge. And then ideally, they're looking for a ripple effect. They're wanting to see other companies come to that new city to be in Amazon's proximity, and it's called an agglomeration effect. So they're looking sort of for a snowball effect with Amazon at the center.
Now, in a recent article, you go through some of the negative aspects that also come along with having Amazon in your backyard. What are the standout key points there?
Well, I think you have to look at, that people with that much earning power are going to bid up the price of housing. They're going to add to congestion. They're going to make things more expensive. And basically all these 238 cities they're making a bet. They're betting that those costs will be outweighed by the benefits. And certainly I think that's a calculation that you really need to scrutinize.
Now, how does it differ some of the short-term benefits versus the long view?
Well, I mean, clearly you're looking at, salary. You're saying $100,000 a year salaries times, 50,000, and that's a short-term benefit. But longer term, you could look for things like increased tax revenues for schools, maybe better transit. But the problem is that these costs and benefits aren't equally distributed. So you're going to have a small number of people who will get some really good jobs. You'll have a large number of people who won't get those jobs, but will instead put up with the costs, the congestion, the higher housing prices. And it's that calculation that cities really need to pay attention to.
Now, a lot of these cities are offering tax breaks of some kind. So do tax breaks like this and the one that we saw with Wisconsin and Foxconn, do they work?
The word is still out on that. I mean, these companies, or rather these cities, are willing to make these huge bets with the hope that whatever happens longer term, they're going to see a payoff. But for the most part, it's hard to see how a city can recoup those kinds of expenditures directly. What they're really hoping for is a ripple effect in the economy, more jobs, and more revenues that way. But essentially, it's a political gambit. They're saying, I want to be the city that won Amazon. I want to be the politician that won Amazon. And if 5 years, 10 years down the line, it doesn't quite pay off, I'm probably not going to be in office.
So in terms of things that some of these cities should perhaps be paying a bit more attention to in terms of what might be around the corner, what are the standouts for you?
Well, again, I think they need to be very concerned about their housing market. I mean, typically, the kind of city that Amazon is looking for is the kind that's already attracting the workforce that Amazon needs. So it's already attractive. It's already bringing people in. It's probably got a housing market that's already just on the bare edge of affordability. So you bring in 50,000 newcomers with that much earning power, you're going to tip your housing market into, a much harder place for people to afford. So those are the things you have to take into account. And again, it's hard for a city to turn down this kind of prospect, though. And again, they'll say to themselves, we need to grow now and we'll deal with the costs later.
So then how likely is Seattle now and even the next city vying for a huge company to set up shop there, how much are they in danger of becoming a one-business town?
Well, that was certainly Seattle's concern right up until Amazon announced it was looking for a second headquarters, but it still is a concern. Amazon is the biggest employer in downtown Seattle. It's the biggest supplier of tax revenues. So there is the risk that if something were to happen to Amazon, even in a city as diverse as Seattle, it could, have a serious impact. And that's something that a smaller town that's trying to bid for the headquarters needs to take into account. They're essentially they're putting all their chips on one bet, and there's risks there. So it's again, this isn't something to take lightly, and yet again, it's also something that cities they're throwing caution to the wind in many respects.
And we have seen what tends to happen when smaller cities rely on one company and then that company leaves town, and so do the jobs. So how should cities protect themselves so that if the company falters, the city doesn't falter along with it?
Well, I think that there's a limited amount of things that cities can do. If you're below a certain size and you make Amazon your biggest employer and the biggest driver of your economy, you're really hitching yourself to Amazon's wagon and to the tech sector more broadly. So really, the ideal city to take Amazon's second headquarters is large enough both to absorb this many newcomers without too many negative impacts, and also to have enough diversity and a large enough economy that if Amazon were to tank or run into antitrust issues, for example, or find some new competitor, that their entire economy, the city's entire economy, wouldn't be taken with it.
So if you had to guess, which city or region do you think Amazon has the best chance of becoming the new HQ?
At this point, we don't really know what the criteria are that Amazon is using. I mean, we have the basic ones, a city with 1 million+ people, big research university, workforce, transit, airport, all those things. But we don't really understand why it is that Amazon felt the need to separate itself. I mean, we know that Amazon couldn't keep growing like it was in Seattle. There was no way that Seattle could absorb another 50,000 workers. So it was always understood by people who were being realistic that Amazon would need to have another campus somewhere. Those in Seattle hoped it would be nearby. But the larger question is, what is Amazon trying to do here? And I think you also have to sort of ask the question, does it even work in the long run for a company like Amazon to have 2 headquarters? I mean, how does that work? And that's sort of been lost in the shuffle over this race for cities to win the headquarters. So again, it's very tough to know. I mean, if they're simply looking for new space, then they could do it in California somewhere. If they're wanting to have maximum difference in a labor market, I mean, they've made some comments that they're looking for a new population to draw workers from.
Right.
Maybe the East Coast.
Well, certainly a jury's still out on that, but thank you so much, journalist Paul Roberts, author of The Impulse Society, America in the Age of Instant Gratification.